20th, 2021 meeting of the Cedar Rapids Community School District Audit Committee. We will begin with the first part of item on our agenda is approval of the minutes from our December 16th, 2020 meeting. Any additions or corrections to that?
I would move to approve. This is John Hammer.
Thank you, John.
And I'll second.
Second. Is Sarah on?
Yes, I see.
Okay, well, she said, I didn't know who got the second. All right, thank you.
Justin, sorry to interrupt.
That's okay.
Justin, can you give me rights to share my screen?
Oh, my bad. Take 2 seconds and you're golden.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Can people see my screen? I just want to make sure people can see it, the agenda. Okay, there we go. All right, are we ready to move on?
Yes, proceed.
All right, I'm going to have, we're going to be going into item number 2 on our agenda, talking about our IT risk. And first off, I'm just going to have Jason Marshall from Grantwood EA. He can speak to what they're currently doing for us. And there's a little summary here that I have presented for him. So Jason, do you want to kind of take over?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Dave. Yeah, Jason Marshall, I think I've met with you all before, past couple of years. I'm the coordinator of educational informational technology here at Grantwood EA. And as I put in the notes, there are kind of 2 areas that we provide some hosting and support and software for Cedar Rapids. The first is PowerSchool. And even though the district has moved away from PowerSchool to Infinite Campus in the 1920 school year, we've kept that server up and going just so that you get the district get it to some historical data. We did kind of have a plan to move it. We moved it. There were some issues getting it up and going on a network, so we brought it back to Grantwood so you can continue to get that information. And then, like a lot of things, we were starting to work on a new plan to get that back into the district, and then to ratio hit, and we haven't got back to that. So currently, the district's still accessing it, and the server sits at Grantwood. And that's something that I'll need to work with Cedar Rapids IT to get a plan going yet this year to figure out next steps to either shut that down or move it to the district so they can have the data. And that's where that's at. Business application. So in kind of similar, the district is moving away from Grantwood's business application and payroll system, moving to an Infinite Visions product. That was delayed a year, but I believe, and David can correct me, I believe that's still on track to happen, I think July 1st. And so kind of a similar deal. At that time, we would need to figure out the district would like access to the historical data. And this application, we don't actually host at Grantwood. We host it in Volta, which is a data center in Marion. And speaking with them, what we've came up with is a plan or an option, and we haven't finalized yet, but that we could just transfer the instance of that server out at Involta into Cedar Rapids' account, and then Cedar Rapids could take ownership of that, and they would be able to have access to that for as long as they wanted, and we would just take it off of our hosting plan. So that's the option we're looking at now, but we haven't finalized if that's the option we're going to move to. On the security side, we routinely do penetration testing, security testing, and we've had a penetration test in the last 2 years. They usually find very few things for us to take a look at, but everything they give us, we always come back and we make those changes as recommended. We use a company out of Coralville North Liberty, I think, more out North Liberty, called Pro Circular, and they're a security firm, and been very happy with them. And we actually did an audit on our software most recently, just kind of the code and how we set some stuff up set some things up, and they gave us some recommendations there for moving forward. And we're actually, it's not kind of out in the open yet, but probably in February at our board meeting, we're going to announce a change in direction for our business applications and payroll system. So that doesn't really affect Cedar Rapids, as they're already moving off, but we're looking at a new kind of a new direction to become more public at that time. And that's very short. That's what I have. Any questions I can answer for anybody?
Jason, could I ask a quick question, please?
Yeah.
I was distracted by my technical issues here. But at first, as I understand it, Cedar Rapids has gone to the virtual campus type software, right, for keeping track of grades, etc. Is that?
Yeah. Yep. Correct.
And so the Power School is not. I want to say this. I guess what concerns me is you will eventually be able to move that data so that it's accessible for the district, right? I mean, I don't know how long state agencies have to retain records, but is that why you have to keep it? Is because that's where the grades and everything else is in that data?
And Craig might be able to answer
I'll
this
jump
too,
in
but
there.
yeah, sure.
Yeah, hi, Maureen. Craig Barnum here, Executive Director of Digital Literacy for the district. We're keeping that around just as sort of courtesy. Some of the data that didn't come over is non-compliance data. So data around behavior would be a big one, just doesn't translate well between the two systems. And so the further we get away from the transition point, the less valuable that data is. So our hope is that as we get into next year, we can at least capture the data in another way, or, get rid of it. All of our compliance data, all of the stuff that's required by state code, which says we have to keep in perpetuity, which would be things like record of attendance, grades and transcripts, have all been fully transferred into Infinite Campus or in other permanent record formats. And so I think we're good there. This is largely just something that occasionally someone has a question about, and it's nice to have data, not need to have data.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Good way to put it.
Jason, I do have a question. This is probably, it's more for accessing data at the Involta. If we take that over as a district, that data, would we access the data in the same way that we would access information from the Grantwood software right now for our financial data? Would it be the same way? And it's just okay. Perfect.
Basically, from my understanding, talking to them, they would just, it's all virtual anyway. They would just move the database over and the software over to your account, and they'd spin it back up. It would work exactly the same as it had before. It would just be under your billing rather than under Grantwood's, and that would be the difference. And I can't anticipate why it wouldn't continue to work. I suppose in the future, if something would come up, I would think for at least several years you wouldn't have any issues, and you needed some programming assistance that we could provide that if there was something that needed change, like an Adobe update or something, maybe if you're using PDFs. I mean, some things like that possibly, but otherwise it should stay up.
Okay, that's good to know. I was just curious if it was like the raw data there, how do we access it? That was my concern about. So thank you.
Sure, yeah.
Hey guys, this is Chad. Just a quick question here on potential security incidents. If they're, hypothetically speaking, I guess here, if there is a security incident, would that be brought to this committee? Where would that show up? And are there historical security incidents that are out there?
Your second question I can answer. I'm not aware of any we've had. I know we did before my time. There was an issue on the finance side with a district in Northwest Iowa. That was investigated. It was determined it was not any breach into our system. It was there was a key logger or something on the district, on the business manager's computer at that district. Everything was limited to that. That's the only instance I can think of. There's been none since I've been here, and that was the only one I've heard of before. I don't know. As far as being brought to that committee, I think if it affected Cedar Rapids, it would. We have a pretty broad spectrum of hosting. Like, for instance, if one of our Power School districts that's hosted a Power School, there was some type of issue there, I don't know that would ever come to Cedar Rapids. It would probably only be if Cedar Rapids was involved in it.
Thank you.
I would think initially, and Dave, correct me, that something like that would certainly be reported to the board, correct?
Yeah, I think initially, depending on the timing of when something would have happened, obviously we would report back to this committee if we did have a data breach or something like that that we needed to. But the most likely, you would, depending on the timing, and Craig, let me know if I'm wrong. If we did have a data breach, it would probably be known, possibly even before the committee. We might have had another meeting, and it's out public, and this is what we're doing, and we're having to address it, and we're doing everything we need to do, and to make us that known, because I think it would be a huge deal publicly, and that would be out very quickly if we did.
I agree, Dave. I think that's exactly, we would act on it as soon as we had credible information and start working through mitigation tactics and contacting, following basically the protocols in place through our cyber insurance policy, all that stuff, to take care of that.
Well, and I think it does raise an interesting question I hadn't thought of. I haven't checked the charter for this, but as far as RT, this committee's interest is risk, right, for a breach or whatever the popular thing is now. Is there another committee that has oversight of IT? I'm not creating a bureaucracy here for you.
No,
I'm just curious.
There's another committee that Jeff Lucas and I work with, and Jeff's going to take the lead on the more technical end of this. But we work with that helps us oversee the spending of SAVE dollars, the SAVE Oversight Committee.
Okay, I was assuming we weren't the only ones asking questions. I just had, for my own sake, I had to know.
Nope. It's that committee is a great committee led by a number of community business leaders who give us a lot of great feedback. So we appreciate them.
All right, then where are we at? Who's up next? We're not done with IT yet, are we?
No, we're not done. I didn't know if anybody else had any other questions for Jason before we let him go. All right.
Thank you, Jason.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
And now we're going to turn it over to Craig and Jeff. So I'm not sure who was going to take the lead in talking about this, but here's kind of a document that just give you a quick, like 1,000-foot overview. But I'll let them guys take over. So
yeah, I'm going to let Jeff go because this is really Jeff's purview. I certainly support him and try to make sure we got the right piece in place to do this work. But Jeff's the architect of this and does a great job for us. So I'm going to let him take the credit here. So go ahead, Jeff.
Hello, everybody. Jeff Lucas, Information Technology Manager for the district. And put together these quick notes just to kind of give you a little bit of background on where we are this year and what we've done this year. In a normal year, we would do a lot of the same things. Every 2 years, we like to do a security audit / penetration test. It just so happens last year was the year we intended to do it. But with everything that went on last year, we had to shift some things around. So it is now on the agenda again for this year. Matter of fact, I'm having initial conversations on it again next week. So it's front and center again. But the main things we did for this year was, with our change to Google and from Microsoft in the past, we had two-factor authentication enforced in Microsoft. And this was the year we really pushed to kind of do the same thing for Google. We finished that up right around the end of the calendar year. So that puts two-factor authentication on every Google-facing application. We also added protection and mitigation services for our primary internet service provider. And what this does is to kind of present or protect us from unknown actors pushing irrelevant data and traffic our way to overflow our circuits so that we can't function. So essentially what this does is it gives us a little insight and kind of gives some reporting so we can see what the traffic on our internet service looks like from our provider's perspective, and also kind of see how it aggregates what is the main sources that it comes from, so we can have an idea if it's coming from 1 or 2 or 3 places that are not expected, and then we can use the mitigation tools to silence those so our internet service goes back to a normal way of life, I guess is the easiest way to say it. And then the other thing we really focus on is we use a tool called Mode Before, which gives all sorts of training materials, videos, and other information that we use to kind of keep our staff up to date on what kind of threats are out there and how those threats may present themselves to our staff. So it helps them recognize emails that may contain phishing links, or it helps them recognize social engineering things that are trying to get them to divulge information that they normally wouldn't. That's essentially what that service provides us, and it gives us a little peace of mind because we can send them through little processes and practices so they can actually we can actually send them something that kind of imitates what a malicious attack would look like. And therefore, if they see it, react to it, they'll know, oh, this is a test. I've passed the test. But if they fail, it points them back to us and says, okay, this was a test. This is what you missed. This is how we want you to review this information again because this is an important task that kind of got you caught up in a new tactic or an existing tactic or however that could be. So those are the big tools that we focused on to kind of help keep some of our end user security in place. We are planning in 2021 to kind of move forward with that security audit from last year, and then also look at improved monitoring tools to supplement our firewall, give us more insight into individual traffic that's coming through there, actually take some of the traffic and relay it back exactly to an end user. So instead of it just being listed as an IP address, it can tell us an IP address and the username associated with the IP address down to the device level. So those are some things we're looking to implement as well. And then we really have started some conversations about what other services should we put two-factor authentication on. And we've had some good conversations about that, and we're kind of moving in a direction where we're going to put additional security measures in place on a lot of our services. So that's kind of a high-level overview of where we are and where we've been. But for the most part, yeah, a lot of our plans for this year got sidetracked by online learning needs and the ability to shift and make some of those happen. So,
I think you're being pretty humble when you say that. You guys were able to accomplish after the ratio, even the pandemic and then that too. So it's amazing.
Thank you.
Really. Could I ask then, and I don't mean to take anybody else's place in my question, aside from these sting operations you do on your staff, which would make me sweat if I was there, but do you have an annual computer security program that you send staff through, or is it just these random uncomfortable situations they get caught up in?
I know generally in the past we've used a company, RSM Gladry. I think they do a lot of the financial audits. They also have an IT side as well. And we've used them to do some audits just to kind of check our practices, do some penetration testing and see things like that.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean that. I mean with staff.
With staff, yeah. KnowBe4 does that. Yeah, KnowBe4 has a whole curriculum of things, and typically what we do with that is we'll send that out in advance and say, hey, watch these training experiences. Yeah. Sometimes they're videos, sometimes they're simulations, and once you're done with that, know that at some point in the next 6 weeks, we're going to send a fake one along, a honeypot, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
To see if, who needs remediation. And that's really what it's about. We're not trying to be nasty with it.
Oh, I didn't think so. I think it's a pretty cagey way of checking your training anyway. But
yeah, and honestly, the things that scare me the most, and I think I'd speak for Jeff a little bit here, it's the social engineering stuff that really is the most worrisome. And, this at least sets the stage for us to start having people think about that stuff. So.
Okay. Anybody else have some questions?
A quick question here, I guess. I don't want to dwell on it, but is there a tool that the school district has to identify where internal users might might export personally identifiable information externally? I mean, is there a data loss prevention tool that would identify that and prevent that, or at least identify it and report it?
At this point, no, we don't specifically have a tool like that. We do have, in some of our areas, especially inside our Google platform, we have a report that can go through and kind of identify the information and tell us who has it. And then that gives us the ability to make sure it's shared appropriately, make sure it's locked down appropriately. But at this point, there's nothing that really tells us if it goes outside it. That is one of the tools that's high on our list this year when we talk about looking for new monitoring tools. That is definitely one of them.
Thank you.
And just to reiterate what you said, there are protections within the system, right, that would safeguard just anybody accessing any data, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Thanks. That was a good question, though.
Jeff, on
Anybody else?
the protected mitigation services that we've added to our internet, so have we been attacked where you saw like heavily and then things that we had to kind of shut things down on that because they were like trying to flood our stuff? Have we seen some of that happening at times?
In early December, we did see an attempt. The attempt was, it wasn't conceived well enough that anybody noticed. It was enough bandwidth that it would have crippled other school districts. But I think when they did it, they didn't understand how much bandwidth we truly had. So they didn't compose an attack big enough to take it on. Mm-hmm. So that service did pick it up and did tell us it was happening.
Okay.
But it wasn't big enough that anybody would notice.
Okay, good. I was just curious if we've actually seen that. And my next question for you guys would be, what are some of the other schools being faced with that you have been aware of? I know there have been like ransomwares and those types of things. What have you guys been hearing across the state and your guys' what's happening to some of the schools out there?
I'll let Jeff speak more in just a minute, but I would say one of the first things I'm going to hit right back at is the DDoS mitigation we just bought.
Yeah.
We've had 2 neighboring school districts in our area who have lost significant instructional time and productivity time to these types of exploits. And so we wanted to get out in front of that because it's just a matter of time before that happens to us. In fact, it already did. We just are a little bigger animal, and so it wasn't coordinated in a way that hurt us. But if someone gets enough wherewithal, they could. But that's the one that had kept me up at night mostly. But certainly, there are other threats. You mentioned ransomware and other social exploits where there gets to be a keylogger or something on a program, on a critical computer, and information gets out. And that's a lot of the thought behind the know before. And we're just really trusting that our staff takes that seriously. Because at least for the business services side, it's really critical. On the other side, the other thing we kind of do, which we haven't talked a lot about, is we really try to limit as much personally identifiable information as we can in our other data systems, so that if a teacher's password gets breached, it's not. We try to manage permissions such that it's. There's not going to be a lot of vulnerability if that happens, or if a student's would. Still doesn't mean we want it to happen, but it does make things a little easier. Typically, more what happens in those lines is that we get embarrassed because somebody posts something as a teacher or disrupts a learning environment as someone else, impersonates someone else. Jeff, what are your thoughts? You probably have much more to add and much more interesting detail than I did.
Well, I know there are some districts in the state who have experienced some of the ransomware issues, and some of them are public. I don't necessarily want to point out names, but I know we've talked about it a little bit in some of our UEM meetings. And in fact, I have one this afternoon where there are some topics along this avenue, just to kind of get a feel for some of the latest developments districts have seen. But overall, I really haven't heard of a lot of them. And in our conversations, a lot of people are doing the same things we are. They're trying to shore up their defenses to make sure they're prepared when it does happen, because I think everybody kind of agrees. If you haven't had it happen, you're kind of lucky, because for the most case, people are out there looking for ways to do this for various reasons and have targets on about anybody. So far so good, but I know we are definitely comparing notes and trying to make sure that we're all paying attention and trying to learn from the experience of others.
Other questions? Well, again, I just want to say I've told Dave this. I'm amazed at how districts responded this year, and then especially as the derecho hit, how it's just amazing what you guys have been able to do to get up to accommodate the remote learning and things. I was over at First Lutheran dropping off stuff for the food shelter that we do, and there was a group of kids there, and they apparently were part of a group that went to First Lutheran so they could have their classes because there was no other way of getting internet access. So I was just amazed, really, really amazed. Thank you for taking time to give us a good survey this time too.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us. We appreciate it. Reach out if there's any other questions. Thanks, everybody. Take care, all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, we're going to move on to is Jordan here today?
No, it's Chris.
Oh, Chris is here. Okay. Well, we're going to hear, if you're looking at number 3 on our agenda, we're going to talk about, we kind of hit on this earlier. There's a little bit of background, and Dave correct me, and Chris correct me if I'm saying anything inaccurate. But before the business side of the district shifted over to this new software, which is now managed by Grantwood, it used to be handled at the building level. And due to...
Maureen, I think we have another one first.
Oh, okay. Am I screwed up?
We're on number 3.
Yeah. Okay. Why don't we just go ahead? I'm sorry. Okay. Keep all that and I won't repeat it later. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So we are with the auditors, right?
Yeah, we are with the auditors talking about the internal controls or any special audit things that have happened.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Sorry. I'm sorry, Chris, to take your time. I'll get back to you.
You're good. Yeah. So, just to give everybody kind of an update, if we go back to the December 16th meeting, me and Jordan presented kind of the draft financial reports. They were in draft format just due to the fact that the compliance supplement had not been out yet. So that got issued right before Christmas. We have finalized the reports just, was it yesterday, Dave? Or
Yep.
Monday?
Yeah.
So those have been finalized. So those are in final report stages. So just to kind of give everybody an update on that. As far as, major issues or anything related to internal controls, each year under governmental auditing standards, we do look at the district's, internal controls. We don't opine on those controls, but we would, give the district, the board, as well as the audit committee, any deficiencies that we found out throughout the audit process. This year, similar to in years past, we didn't find anything that would require communication of a significant deficiency or material weakness. So, and what we do in that aspect of is we look at the controls of each major transaction cycle. So, revenues, receipts, disbursements, expenditures, all those informations, treasury, and we do test controls over each one of those sections to determine if there's a control breakdown or anything like that. So, like I said before, we didn't have anything of communication that needed to be communicated to the audit committee or board this year that rose to the significance of a significant deficiency or material weakness, or I think, in fact, any deficiency in that matter. So, overall, the controls are good, and what Sherry and Dave do from a district standpoint are very good mitigating risk for the district. So
Excellent. That's good news.
And then as far as, special audit steps, and this kind of goes into number 4 as well, but, each year throughout the planning process, we do a risk assessment. We look for areas that, might be of risk for the district, and we kind of designed some unpredictability steps within those planning meetings, those planning processes. This year, a lot of our discussions were held around COVID and the COVID environment and what could potentially be could potentially be done. Maybe a lack of controls, or our world was turned upside down. People working remotely. Maybe reviews weren't being done timely. So we really focused on that. The mid-March to late June timeframe in our unpredictability testing, making sure the district still maintained control, still review processes were in place, that nobody was mitigating those controls to make payments to themselves, or one of our tests were to make sure employees weren't being set up as vendors, or employees weren't setting up fictitious companies to pay themselves as well. So we did a lot of testing over that to make sure controls were still in place, and everything appeared to be in place when we tested. So.
Could I do a follow-up question on what you covered? In the back of my mind, in our past audits, there was a review of vendors. Was there not? I mean, a total review, or was it just a sampling as you described?
Well, each year we do review vendors. We will make test control samples to make sure vendors are appropriate. We usually incorporate it into our unpredictability test. Some years we do Benford analysis, which kind of an analytic that shows, all the vendors and how much they were paid to see any anomalies if a vendor is being paid the same amount over and over and over. So we do try to incorporate a lot of the vendor testing in our unpredictability.
Chris, if I may, a couple of years ago,
Yeah.
before Steve left Marine, you may recall we did that special internal control audit, and that was a very deep dive into all the vendors.
See, Sherry, thank you. That's what I remember.
Okay.
And I'm not saying we need it now. I just thought periodically it's a good thing to do. I presume there's also in place a conflict of interest statement that people have to complete with the district, right? Or internally?
Yeah.
I believe so. I believe that's a state compliance requirement.
Okay.
And we also, on the vendor side of things, we're also, which kind of ties to a lot of our federal funding requirements, where we're looking at making sure the companies we're doing business with, and we do an annual review of anything over X amount. I think was it $25,000 that we're paying. I can't remember the threshold. And
Yes.
we are making sure that they have not been disbarred, from us being able to do business and on the federal level. So we do those on an annual basis, and that's just a routine, not annual. Is it annual?
Twice, semi-annual.
Yeah, semi-annual.
We're just finishing ours through December.
Yeah.
And
So
that's for any, let's say this, it's just not tied to federal dollars. It's anytime that those federal dollars come into a district.
It's actually all of our vendors that we test.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, good.
But it does tie into a lot of our federal requirements that we are required to do that on the federal side. So,
Correct.
but we do that for everything. So, but I just wanted to point out in our packet of information here, because when they're testing our controls, they're testing our new controls that we have put in place, and we have changed a lot of controls over time, especially after our fraud that we had, embezzlement that we had for the district. And this is the copy of the recommended control procedures that came out of that from the state auditor. That's what's in here that I have before you. These are a lot of the recommendations that came out of that special audit. If you wanted to see the full, I'll actually have the link available that you can actually see the full report if you wanted to take a look at it. But these are a lot of the things that we actually made changes for. And on a quarterly basis, Sharon and I sit down and take a look at a lot of these recommended changes and a lot of things that we put in place. We review them, we talk about them to make sure that we're still in line with what needs to happen. And so I'm not going to go in detail of this stuff, but I do want to make sure that you guys have this. You can see what some of the recommendations that they found and what some of the recommendations were from that state audit. So.
And those,
Chris, I was just going to ask I was just going to ask when I read these, the individual recommendations, particularly number C there on the SOD issue, I would perceive that as being a significant issue, a significant control issue. Is that still open?
No.
Okay.
No,
Yeah,
this was back in 2009, Dave.
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So these are
So
all issues that are closed.
Correct. These are from that state audit that we had. These are some of the deficiencies they found back then and recommended changes. So yeah, we have beefed up a lot of different areas. But that is just for reference. And we made a ton of changes, but they're actually auditing us on our changes, not what the deficiencies were before, but based on our new procedures and guidance that we have in place.
and that is a bit of background. I'm glad that Dave included this information about the 2009 audit, that I wasn't on the committee at that time. I know that the committee wasn't even in existence at that time, was it?
No.
Or we grew out of that.
Is that correct, Sherry? Audit committee wasn't existing at that time?
I believe it did exist.
Oh, but not at this level, probably. It was to focus maybe on
I
different.
hope not, but I mean, it was an embezzlement, which is always hard to deal with. But I know since I've been around, and for the people serving on the board, this district is very aware of that audit that happened to them. And I don't know how many times I have over the years served on this committee, the district has said, representatives, we know because this happened, we don't want it to happen again. So they've been, it's always in the rearview mirror as far as the district is concerned.
And you noted somewhere in the meeting materials that what we're seeing on page 6 and on is historical information, that's not current?
That's what I have included in here, review of 2009 state auditor special report. And, that's what it's in our agenda. That's
I
what
gotcha.
it is. I guess I could put it on the header on that, but that's what it is. And I think we do this on an annual basis because we have members come off and on. And I think it's always nice for the current new members to see this is what we were faced with. This is, so because that was such a significant embezzlement that we had, and it's something that we always want to keep on top of mind, and that's why we continue to resurrect this on an annual basis because we know we have some new members. Some of you have been on for a little while, know that you see this every year, but I think it's nice to keep that on top of everybody's mind. So.
Okay, but now, Chris, have you covered everything you want to cover with us on this?
On number 3, just like I said, our gas or government auditing standards opinion is included in the financial report. Kind of talks about what I just talked about. We don't opine on it, but we would communicate any deficiencies and we indicate that we didn't find anything during the year. So the internal controls are strong at the district. So.
Okay. Well, I think we have a nice segue now on 4, right, Dave? Do you want to take that, or Chris, you want to do 4 too?
Yeah, I can do 4. I think it's just talking kind of about our risk assessments, what we kind of go through.
Yep.
So I have some notes here. In planning an audit procedure, obviously we're required to follow auditing standards. The standards, under risk assessment are AU 315 and AU 330. That requires us as auditors to develop a risk assessment plan and then perform audit procedures to address those risk assessments. So kind of from a firm background for us, our risk assessment starts in the early planning stages. We do what we call a risk assessment procedure or clear form. This goes through and asks questions about the district, goes through any significant changes at the district. Anything that could potentially be of risk at the district is vetted at that point. And then obviously based on that, our audit procedures and kind of our materialities are set through that process. So a lot of changes during the year might result in a riskier audit for us, that we need to, maybe lower our materialities to really dig into some areas of the audit that might be risky to the district. After kind of our clear process is done, we sit with Dave and Sherry and have a planning meeting that's just going through areas that they feel might be of concern of the district or areas that have changed throughout the year. This is really just to gauge, kind of the significant changes that we need to incorporate either into our internal control understanding. So if people left during the year, if there's turnovers, we need to make sure the controls around those individuals have been updated or haven't changed, that additional individuals have taken in that role. And then we also discussed the impact of new accounting standards. As we kind of talked about at last meeting, GASB issues standards every single year. This year they did relieve the district of a lot of those standards through GASB 95 because of COVID. But coming down the pipeline, we have GASB 84 relooking at fiduciary activities, and GASB 87 are leases. So those are some areas that potentially could develop some risk for the district, and making sure the recording of those are complete and accurate. So we'll be working with Dave and Sherry to make sure those are implemented correctly and recorded appropriately for the district. And as part of those client planning meetings, we do our fraud inquiries. We do those with everybody from the president of the board or the board chair to the audit committee, to Dave and Sherry, as well as anybody within a major transaction cycle. So we kind of do it with IT, department heads, HR, just to kind of gauge if they have any concerns within the financial statements or those control cycles. That we need to be made aware of, and develop audit procedures around that. After we do all of that, we have our internal planning meetings. That's where we develop our risk for the audit. We develop fraud risks. We develop audit procedures surrounding those fraud risks. In years past, we have management override of control. That's meaning if management can take a transaction from beginning to end and manipulate the controls to do that, we tried to test for that. We do our revenue recognition, fraudulent revenue recognition. So we develop tests to make sure revenue at the district is appropriate, that they're not recognizing fictitious revenue to meet covenants under the SAVE bonds or anything like that. So those are the two main ones we have. We also develop some significant risk over the assumptions used in the OPEB and the pension plans, or the pension plan, I should say. So IPERS and the district's other post-employment benefits, those are some pretty big liability numbers that get reported. So a change in those assumptions or a manipulation of those assumptions could lead to a pretty big impact for the district. So those are the main kind of significant risks that we develop throughout the audit practice or audit process. And obviously, if anything comes out of our meetings with Dave and Sherry or our fraud inquiries, we develop specific tests around that as well. So after that, we develop our audit plan, and then we start our audit. And what Sherry can attest to is we test a lot. We're looking at a lot of invoices. We're looking at a lot of transactions. A lot of variance analysis to make sure things are, going the way they should be, information like that. So that's kind of like a high level, our risk assessment, what we do each year for the district, how we develop, areas of concern that we might need to look into. And like I said earlier, COVID was a big talking point with us this year, and making sure, there wasn't anything of significance in the risk assessment that need to be addressed throughout our audit. So,
any questions, comments? Okay, thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
You're sticking around or not?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
We need his help with a future agenda item.
That's what I thought. Okay. Okay, so let's move on to 4. Dave, I think that's you.
Number 5.
5. Sorry, folks. I need a bigger desk.
Now, what I included in the packet for everybody is actually the communication that came from RSM last year about our spring AUP, which is agreed upon procedures. And this is what Maureen was alluding to earlier in the meeting, where she was talking about how our student activity fund was operated in the past. And I think that's what led to like our agreed upon procedures to make sure that we have some additional oversight because of how our student activity funds are handled. So for the group here, in the past, as clear through FY 2020, which would have been through June 30 of 2020, we operated our student activity funds that we had were operated out of our high schools and middle schools. And so they actually wrote and through what was called a KEV system. And they actually took care of the recording of all their revenue and their expenditures, and they cut the checks from that building level. And at the end of the year, we would get we would do a upload of all the financial information into at the end of the year as a closing entry, and then that would kind of fold into our numbers, and then we would upload that off to the state. And so because of that, we felt like there needed to be a lot more oversight happening. So we actually, at one point in time, we did have an internal auditor, and they probably did a lot of what we've contracted with RSM to do. They would do a lot of testing and checking with our high schools and middle school bookkeepers to make sure everything was being done according to the policy and procedures that we have put in place. And so since then, as of July 1, and what they did also, every school had their own bank account, so we reconciled the bank accounts, but they had their own bank accounts. Now the bank account is in one, all at U.S. banks. So we have one account for student activity funds, and all the schools' revenue expenses kind of funnel into that account. And then they also operate in our Grantwood software, which we are moving away from July 1 into Infinite Visions. But all of that is accounted for in our software. So our controls that we have in place and the processes that we have with the approval of purchase orders and with those requirements that are done, they all flow. That all applies to a student activity fund now. And so that happened as of July 1. So when we talked about this before, back in the spring, we decided because of COVID, we decided last spring to pause this, not to even do it, because we were we didn't have school going on, and because of COVID, we just did not do this in the spring. And then we decided here the fall that we didn't do it in the fall either, but we were going to revisit this. I think some of you might remember that conversation. We're going to revisit this for the spring and have a conversation of what we wanted to do for a agreed upon procedure. So this is not a full-fledged audit. It's testing our controls that we have in place. And so this is the prior one that was done, and I'm going to roll down to, in reality, to the procedures that we were looking at. And I thought for our discussion today, we can kind of look at these procedures that was done and have a conversation on what makes sense for us to do this spring in testing our student activity funds. And what do we need to do? And then that will help us guide us actually in the future. Do we need to do some additional procedures for student activity funds moving forward? Or is it good enough that we have our controls, we're applying our controls just like we are with our general fund, we are with all the other funds, and they are abiding by those. We have our controls in place for the approvals that have to happen. Do we feel like there's a need to continue to do this in the future, or do we just have our normal audit like we normally do? And then occasionally we might hire RSM to do other things like we did just our vendors, those types of things. So I guess we could start off about, because a lot of this, we can kind of look at the controls that we have now and to say, what do we feel like is necessary moving forward here? So because of our new setup of our student activity fund.
Well, Dave and I chatted just briefly before the meeting, and I had indicated to him, and I'll share this with the committee now, is my concern was not so much with the system as that point to when the money got to the system. I don't know, I'm sorry, that probably is not a very easy, artful way to say it for the accountants, but what happened in 2009 happened at the school level with money, cash. And I'm not so much concerned about the system, maybe I should be, but there is, if you don't know, on a normal year, a lot of money that flows through these accounts, cash. And I just, it's hard for me personally to think about not doing something to at least check and see how the new system's working. But that's just my opinion. I'd really like to hear what the other members of the committee has to say about this.
Let me.
So go ahead, Scott.
Okay, thanks, Chad. And then you're up. I think what you're saying, and I think I brought this up to Jordan when we talked about this last time, is I think we probably feel comfortable that the system works as it is in place, and Chris probably could back us up on that. I think the concern is if we've got cash coming in, whether we have people that are taking some of that cash and putting it in their pocket. And I think that that's one of those things that it's almost impossible to test unless there's some sort of ticketing system, unless there's some sort of audit procedure. I think Jordan kind of told me, yeah, Scott, that's not something we really can test. That's just kind of an inherent risk that everybody has. But I'd like to hear Chris and David's opinion on that.
Chris?
Yeah, no, and I think, what we kind of stressed is you can't audit what's not there, right? So if the issue now with the district, right, is the risk is that the individuals that are handling the cash aren't even reporting it or getting it to the district. So it can be a part of the control process that's now implemented. So, how our struggle is how do you, develop procedures to test for that, to give assurance over that, or just to make sure that, individuals are depositing or giving the district that cash. So, and Dave, I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit, but I guess that's where I think that's great that the district brought everything in-house and is now under the one control cycle. Now, how do we get comfortable that those people handling the cash at the schools are reporting that to the district or giving that to the district?
Yeah, that is always challenging from the standpoint of where we can, obviously gate receipts and those types of things. We have controls on that. It's the other things where you're maybe doing a fundraiser and those types of things and making sure that stuff gets fully to the bookkeepers initially and then get over to us to get for the deposits. But I do wanted to, some of the controls that we do have, we are using armored cars to help transport some of the funding. We are using that. But I do think when we're talking about what other controls can we do from the sponsor level, the coaches level, and those types of things, what could we do on top of, because we would do like, if say for example, if there's like a resale type of a thing, maybe they're doing t-shirt sales or something like that. We can look at those some types of things, making sure there's reconciliations that are happening to make sure that how many t-shirts they have purchased, making sure when the funding comes in that all reconciles appropriately with what should be coming in for that. And those types of testing. But yeah, that is really difficult, when you're saying on some things where, they collected money and but the thing is, anybody who handles money, they all go through training. Everybody who handles money goes through cash training, and what they're supposed to do with that and handling, giving out receipts and doing all that, everybody does that. Even the coaches or sponsors are required to do that. Correct, Sherry?
Yes, for the most part. Our bookkeepers and secretaries have the very thorough training. You once in a while will have a teacher or facilitator that they only handle cash maybe once for a very small item, then it's the bookkeeper secretary that goes to them. So during our back to school training, which is in addition to the cash management training, we talk about the security of funds, the training of others. And at the training, we actually have an agreement that all of the bookkeepers and secretaries sign saying that they've received this material. They know where the manuals are, they understand them, and they understand the responsibility.
But so if we kind of walk through there, what we have previously done, and maybe that will help us decide what we think. Do we think that's beneficial? Continue on this year to address, like for example, number one, to agree cash and investment reconciliation for those months. I'm not sure necessarily that is necessary. We do reconcile, and I don't know if we've ever had any issues in the past whatsoever, and that's something that we do reconcile all our funds, and we also reconcile the student activity fund. So I'm not necessarily sure if that's a necessary thing to do at this point in time moving forward, because it's one account now, and we reconcile that just like we do all the other funds. So in my opinion, I don't think that's probably necessary to check that, for those months. But as we're talking about, selecting receipts and disbursements, and especially on the receipts side, to make sure money is getting, put in a timely fashion, maybe that's something that is worth looking into. And Sherry, can you explain how that has changed, or if it has changed since the KEV time, the receipt?
In getting money into the district,
Yeah.
The receipts actually are entered now by the bookkeeper secretaries at the schools. The receipts are electronically received here. We still use the bank bags and general remittance forms. They're matched up with the receipts. The receipts are matched up with the bank deposit. So there's actually a more thorough oversight on that at this time. Did you have any more specific questions, Dave?
No, that was kind of having that procedures in place. And Chris, do you feel based on those procedures in place, is that worth investigating and agreed upon procedures to make sure, if there's any issues on that?
Maybe for the first semester that's been in place. So maybe this year, maybe it is a good idea just to take a look at those procedures, make sure they're being followed. And maybe if not, there's no issues there, maybe revisit that, and maybe, since there are process in place that is pretty sound, I think maybe we revisit that next semester.
Okay.
Or next fall.
Okay. So on the receiving side, that's great. And I kind of agree. I kind of would like to see that myself too, to make sure everything is appropriate. But on the disbursement side, all of that's flowing through our current process now, through our approval process in our current system, with the approval of the purchase orders and now they're all signed by our board president and board secretary. Those are the ones who actually sign the checks. It's not being signed by the principals anymore. So do we feel like on our current AUP, our previous AUP, we had inspect a check and purchase order was assigned by appropriate person, inspect the purchase order, invoice, check amount agree. If the amounts don't agree, then inspect the approval of the confirmation, confirm whether they've approved whatever, supervisor and whatnot, and inspect the disbursement amount was positive to the appropriate activity category as noted on the purchase order or invoice. And so I know we do that. We check everything diligently as it comes through this office before everything goes out. And I mean, we do that all funds. And I know it probably takes us more time because we are actually doing that. We have a lot more that we're monitoring and checking, but I know, and Sherry can allude to that a little bit more, that is a routine that we do and double check everything before all the checks are sent out.
That's correct. And there has been a significant amount of time added to the accounting department But all of these now flow through BSO, which is our purchasing system by Speed Online. And all of these come through the same as all of the district disbursements purchases. The other part, of course, would be our P card. And we've always reviewed all of those, even including student activity funds. So that's not a change there.
Okay.
And from our perspective, those would be included in our audit procedures, those disbursements. So we would be performing test controls over those as well as detail testing.
You talk about your annual audit.
Annual audit, yep, the financial audit.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So this number 3, haphazardly select 100 receipts. Would that be aligned with what we talked about before? Do all the receipt testing, you would still probably do that level of detailed testing you're recommending for this spring?
I probably, and I don't know if you want to do the 100, but that's something we can discuss. Just,
Okay.
I would probably make sure the process is in place this time around.
Okay. So we'll look at the lag time. If there is any lag time from, with the money, the bank bags and getting everything over here and getting that funding deposited. So. Journal adjustments. So was that done at the building level in the past?
Those were done at the building level because the software was there.
Okay.
Excuse me. But now they're all done at the district level. And we have a journal entry form that gets filled out. It's signed by the preparer and by the building principal, and then comes to accounting, and we take it from there.
That's the new process, right?
Yes, that's what we're currently doing. That is the new process.
Okay.
Before they were done all at the district, all at the buildings. And then that's why testing was done.
Okay.
So there's oversight now on any journal adjustments that are done on our end here before
Yes.
they're done. So,
And including the posting of the journal entry, that's even a separate step.
yeah.
And approval is done.
And you guys test for that at the annual audit too, those types of things too. So those would kind of fall into normal testing on a. So I'm not sure.
Yep, that would be under our management override. So we would test manual journal entries and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think number 5 is something that obviously talking with them would be a good thing. All the bookkeepers, at the building levels. So I think we want to maintain that for this spring. So now, do you think you would reach out to them normally at the annual audit too on that, or not on the bookkeepers?
Probably not.
Okay.
Unless there was a specific concern, we would reach out to them, but
Okay.
we probably wouldn't get that far into a detail.
Okay.
And especially since that used to be covered semi-annually.
Mm-hmm.
If you are going to go ahead and do this step, maybe at that time as well, ask the bookkeepers if they have concerns from going from the old system to the new system, and ask them if they feel that there is anything lacking, because they're going to be your first line.
Yep.
We know what we do here. We don't know what they may be thinking. Oh, there may have been other steps that they had done in the old system. It would just be a good chance to kind of bring this all together.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And even the principals, principals and associates, they were used to getting a stack of checks to sign. Now everything goes through the system. the same as all of their other district purchases. So, you know, they were used to that, but now they no longer get their packet of student activity funds. Are they missing? Do they feel that they are getting complete information?
Okay.
Number 6, that's a part of your normal audit, isn't it?
Yeah, and this was a good way, going back to the whole risk of not reporting it. Like you said, it's all under one cash balance now, right? So instead of each fund recorded differently as a revenue?
Yes, it is. We actually have, we'll actually have a fund balance that each buildings will be broken out separately, so you can actually see where everybody is sitting at all times. Even though it's one cash, one bank account, we can delineate how much money each of the schools has. So. Okay.
So maybe I would recommend changing out this step to do a analysis year over year of either fund balance or revenues, because that would kind of show any outliers. If we would expect revenues to remain consistent at one school and either they're way down, then we obviously know either something didn't occur or potential, somebody took cash and didn't report it.
So my question is, would that be at our normal audit that we would want to do, or we do that in this spring's AUP?
I believe we do that as part of our normal audit. So I think that can be incorporated into our audit.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So.
I have the audit file open right now. I'm checking.
Dave, as part of our internal control set for the school district, are there analytic controls that are just built in as part of finance that would be performed monthly, quarterly, et cetera?
Yes, and when we're looking at stuff, we are we'll be always looking at where we were last year compared to the prior year, and the current year to the prior year are a lot of different areas, and that's kind of one of the things, and part of our local revenues report that we're looking at, that's part of that we look at to make sure that if there's something out of line, if we can't explain it, then, because of whatever, then we'll dig in deeper into it. If something's out of whack, we'll dig deeper into it. So that's kind of what our year-to-year comparables that we're doing to make sure that we can explain why 1 year, timing wise, it could be a timing or a grant that didn't come in this year that we didn't get or whatnot. If we can't explain it away, then we'll dig deeper into the situation. So.
Well, Chris, did we determine that was part of the annual audit or not then?
We do some testing, but because we have done these in the past, the AUPs, we rely on those for our testing. So we will incorporate that. We can incorporate that going forward. Since we haven't done it in the fall, we're going to have to do something over that in the fall. So we'll do it in the spring too, and just do it on an annual basis.
Are we coming to the conclusion though that the AUP doesn't provide additional assurance on top of the audit that's already conducted?
Yeah, I think when we're talking about moving forward beyond, if things kind of work out with the receipt transaction testing and see how we're doing, if things are kind of looking good, our controls that we have in place is applying very well to our student activity fund. Maybe it's just our annual audit is just enough that we feel comfortable with that, and making sure that we do all our trainings that we're currently doing with all our bookkeepers, cash trainings that we're currently doing is, we still do that. We still monitor that. And so, but that might be where we end up saying that maybe our annual audit is enough. So.
Do you believe you're saying we may end up after one more cycle?
After the spring review.
Okay. Dave, I wanted to remind you that it's 1:12 according to my time. Did you want to talk about how to proceed 4 to discuss the
Well, what I would suggest, this is kind of leading up because I know we got some other things to talk about before we end. I would love to, because our next meeting right now is not scheduled till March. I would love to, instead of having that wait till March, that we schedule a meeting in February for our audit committee, and we'll bring back some recommended that we think how the AUP will look. We'll bring it back to the committee with what we think is the right things to do this spring, and we'll have the committee review that and say, yes, we agree. This is what we think we should ultimately do this spring for our, which might be our last AUP. It might be, but I think after we do this and get a report back to the committee after this happens, we can evaluate that, because that will come back in the, we'll probably have that before June, I believe, that report, and then we can evaluate whether or not we think we wanted to continue to do that at that time. So, so I was hoping that if the February, I wanted to say 17th, if that date would work for people, I would probably change out the March meeting with the February 17th meeting. And then we can actually bring this up. And so make sure that if we're good with that, we can get that signed off by this group, and then we'll have it bring it to the board for approval, whatever changes that we end up doing for the AUP. And then that will be approved by the board after our meeting on the 17th. So if that works for everybody.
do we need to do a motion on that or not?
I don't think we probably need to do a motion on changing the date.
What's everybody's availability?
Looks good to me.
Okay.
Same.
All right then. So we'll put it down for February 17th.
Yep, and then we'll change out that the March meeting. Then we won't have the March meeting. So we'll pull everything on what we normally do in March on the 17th of February, and then we'll talk about this and try to finalize that. All right. So are we ready to move on then?
We are. Chris, did you have anything else to add?
I do not. Nope.
Okay. And I'm assuming, would you be available on the 17th then?
Yeah, me or Jordan will be available, or both.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay. Let's move ahead then.
And this is the local revenues report. This is, Chad, this is one of the things that we are analyticals that we check to make sure how things are checking out in comparison to the prior year. And so we do this on a monthly basis, and we sit there and look at the numbers and say, okay, is this appropriate? Why would it be off? And you're going to see a lot of the things here are COVID related, COVID, because there was so much revenue that we weren't doing in the spring of last year or we have this year that we did, because we delayed the start of school till the September 21st, and we was August 23rd. So there's a lot of that going on here with COVID related. Or we also lost enrollment, 600 kids. So when we're talking about some registration fees and whatnot, we're down. And so when we're looking at total revenue, but of course, investment income is down significantly. The market is just killed us on investments, and we are modifying all of our estimated budgets. We're down. We're changing our budgets downward quite a bit for our interest income. So I'm just going here to rentals. We're not allowing anybody to rent our facilities right now, and so we are virtually, even though we have some, but it's not at the level that we typically have. So, we have a big influx of refund of prior year. We didn't have any. We only had 27,000, but we actually had a big propane tax refund that we got this year. So that's why a big difference here as an increase, which was good. We go activity fund. This is where we don't have the year-to-year comparison in this. Next year, we will actually have the year-to-year comparison with our student activity funds because this is our first year of in the system. And we could manually go in and try to build this for the prior year but we don't have that right now. We haven't manually built that in. Okay. I'm just trying to jump into things where it might be something big. We had a save. We had some E-rates that got deposited into save last year. Most of the E-rates this year actually got put into in our general fund. A lot of our E-rates collections. Market. 5 Seasons daycare. Our 5 Seasons, is down. That's because of the summer activity was down. So there's not really a whole lot here that jumped out at us in reality, but a lot of it is COVID related that we could, see where the issues were. So.
Hey, Dave.
Yeah.
This is actually a positive variance, but what about the 1990 miscellaneous and PEPL?
You are correct. Let me see here. What is that? 100. I bet you that is a sale of nope. Yeah, it's 1990. I think it's a sale of equipment and stuff that we have that we sold some equipment, a lot more equipment this year. I can verify that real quick, but I think that's what it is. I'm going to pull that up and move that over here and look. You can actually, well, real quick. Oh, well.
I've got that, Dave, if you want. That's EMC insurance, derecho claim.
Oh, there you go. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
That's the money from from our insurance. Thank you. I was drawing a blank on that. So we actually, all of that, we actually paid for some of the expenditures that we incurred ourselves outside insurance. That was out of our PEPL fund. So we got money from our insurance put in there. So.
Dave, your screen that's showing is your email, Gmail.
I know, I'm trying to get back to.
That's what happens when you jump out of screen.
I know.
That's my fault. I asked the question.
No, there's no problems asking questions here.
That was a great question. It's fun to have those questions.
Yeah.
There we go.
That's why we're here.
There we go. All right. So then you have the financial. Because of time, I'm going to jump. You can see what our current month to date through the end of December is. You can see that by funds. You can see our revenues versus expenses, and you can see where right now student activity fund is running a negative. We will be going forward and asking the SB School Budget Review Committee, giving us authorization to transfer some funds from the general fund to help the student activity fund due to them not being able to generate the funds that they need to operate all the activities, because we have very few attendance, at our events and the gate receipts, and we didn't have a lot of things in the spring, so we are lagging significantly. So we'll be asking SBRC for some help. Management fund deficit is really, we get property taxes here coming up in March, and that will actually have revenues exceeding expenditures at that point in time. Nutrition fund is another one that's really struggling right now in comparison with revenue and expenses. We don't, but we did have, I know we got a big revenue boost in December. From our sales were up a little bit more. So that hasn't been booked yet for December. So that's in January. So hopefully that's going to give it a little bit closer than it is right now, $800,000 deficit. But right now we are running, I know we are running a deficit and our nutrition fund. So, but we do have we were sitting pretty good financially to begin the year, because we had we did have to pull out some out of our investments this year to be able to help to manage stuff, but we're still sitting decently. Here real quick, this is a quick summary report. This is from the derecho. This is from all of our facilities where the total estimated loss was at this point in time, which was done in October, I believe. As of October date, these numbers only include the numbers, I believe, is what the derecho company was doing, not necessarily some of the things that we did outside. So this only includes our restoration company. So we have almost $45 million worth of damage, estimated loss. The mitigation is what we did to help clean things up, to get things, ready for repairs or anything to be done. We had about $523,000 of temporary repairs that we had to do right away to some of our facilities, and then about $29 million of estimated repairs. We actually have recovered. Here's a depreciation amount that the restoration company will receive funding for once the repairs, everything is 100% complete, and they get proof of it of invoices, just like you would from your home insurance. Any damage that you would have, you have to kind of substantiate with actual invoices. And so the insurance company, which we signed off on, has already received $33 million of money for all the repairs that they have done. But there's still $11.6 million that they still have to substantiate to get that remaining back, to get reimbursed for those expenses. This is some of the district repairs that we've had. We've had some labor that we had. We actually got $183,000, which matches up some of this with some of that money we saw in PEPL. Payments that we said, like this is the actually the PEPL one, $174,000 payment. That's what kind of rolled into that fund. That's what that one was for. This is all in the general fund, I believe. The insurance payment and amount from labor and some materials, and so a lot of that was in general fund that we had for the derecho. This is CARES. This is a quick summary for CARES. This is we actually received $3 million, and this is the first phase of the CARES Act or ESSER funds. $3.1 million. That includes our $2.6 million that we initially received, plus our GEARS fund, which is like over $500,000, which equated to about this amount. These are some of the expenditures. This is something we were pulled together for the EA, so I thought this would be something the audit committee might like to see. These are some of the expenditures we have concurred. Okay, we actually so we had like $6 million worth of expenses that we have incurred. A big of that part of that was the elementary technology rollout was a big part of the expenses we had incurred. So we had about $6 million of expenses that we weren't expecting to incur due to COVID. We've received, we're going to be receiving from FEMA 400, well, we actually had 3 claims, but this totals up about, almost $500,000 of FEMA claims that we're going to get reimbursed for some of our expenses that we had. And so, then we were thinking this is our unfunded amount that we were thinking that we're probably going to have after all is said and done with. After, when we look at what we have expensed and what was remaining from COVID, a shortfall right here, $2.4 million shortfall, not this $1 million, but $2.4 million shortfall. Thankfully, we just got notification that we have qualified for the phase 2 ESSER amount that we are getting as a district is increased substantially from phase 1. From the district standpoint, we're going to be receiving, it's earmarked at $14.4 million. A lot of that, we can use a lot of that for HVAC upgrades and those types of things. So we are starting working through that right now, trying to figure out a plan and how we would be able to tap into those funds going forward. And quickly, we're running out of time here. Now, this is if you guys seen the and we could put this on the next agenda too, because I think this is worth having a more in-depth conversation. But if you guys have been watching the news, there was a report in the Des Moines Register that Des Moines public schools had some $200,000 worth of expenses over a 7-year period that was kind of for appropriate expenses that have happened through paying bills through a third party for things that should not have happened. And so.
And Dave, I haven't, I asked Dave to include it with the information here just because I always like embezzlement. I like to learn about that kind of stuff. But this had a lot of elements of cash embezzlement, except that it wasn't cash. And it shows weakness in this school's particular system. And I'd asked Dave, where are we? Are we have protections? And actually, as I sat here and listened to discussion of the new system, I was thinking about this case, and we could talk about it next time too, Dave. But if anybody's interested, aside from this article, you can go to the state auditor's site and find a copy of that district's audit, as well as the 2009 one from Cedar Rapids.
Yeah. So on our credit card, on our P card, we do a detailed review of the P card transaction. So where you had 12 received payments for tools, that were not necessarily reasonable. Based on our controls, I don't think there's any way that could actually happen here. Based on our controls and review of P cards and things of that nature would not happen. But the piece that's interesting is when they're using this JA Enterprises, a third party, and making sure that when they're invoicing you, it sounds like they weren't getting the detail necessarily, or reviewing the detail of what they were saying they were billing them for. And so we don't, for most part, when we're talking about where they go out and buy stuff and say that we're going to bill you those expenditures from the detail. For example, we have the Infinite Visions implementation happening. We actually get the detail of what they're saying that they're billing us for, their travel expenses, their meals, and all of that. We are actually getting copies of all of that supporting documentation so that we can verify that's appropriate expenditures. So when we do have those situations rise up with a third party, we do ask for substantiated proof of those types of expenditures so that we can make sure that we're not paying for them for something that is not applied to our project or shouldn't be billed through our agreement that we have with this third party group. So we do do that. I know, I'm sure some of these third party groups that we work with probably don't like that when we're asking for all that detail, but that's our standard policy. We ask for that detail so we can substantiate what they're doing. So, but I think we can bring this back and have a little bit more discussion at the next meeting as well. But yeah, it's interesting. If you haven't seen this, read this, because this is very interesting. What's transpired there, and like always, I'm sure a lot of people learned from us. When we had our embezzlement from other schools, and there's things that we could probably learn from this as well from what was happening, because I think people, when things like this happen, there's a learning thing that all schools districts go through, and they wouldn't be surprised if through IASBA, which is the Iowa Association of School Business Officials, that there will be maybe Des Moines might say, this is what we learned from this, and talk about it. So. And that is it. And we talked about the February meeting. So I think we got that straightened out. And I think we did pretty good job in getting done almost on time.
Before we have the motion for adjournment, I do want to encourage you to do meeting evaluation, even though haven't been so good about doing it different electronically. But if you would, appreciate it, and appreciate the input today too. You can't, from those folks that have the expertise, I really do appreciate it. And hopefully we'll come to a decision in February about what to do about the spring audit. So may I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
I have first. Would anybody like to second that?
I'll second.
Thank you. All right then, we'll see you all February 17th.
Thank you, everybody.